G'day guys, got a little bit carried away this morning. I was helping a client out on the phone and I just started working on this machine and forgot all about the video. So I've just taken the cover off the top of the engine to expose the rockers, etc. I'm getting down to the point of replacing the valve stem seals. So just grabbing everything here. Just as a bit of a heads up, I like these little oil pans that I get from Trade Tools. They are very, very handy. I use them for all kinds of things, not just oil changes, although I use one for oil change on my mower, my ride-on, because it fits underneath the ride-on better than one of the bigger round type oil drain pans does. So I've got a little paper towel in there that allows me to set all this stuff on there and just absorb a bit of the old oil. And because the oil pan is black, it also makes it easier for me to see what's going on. Alright, so take off the rockers. I'm not intending to pull any of that apart. So I'll just clean up a bit of oil. I'm looking at the rocker cover gasket, which is here. I bought a new one. This one has definitely got a few cracks in it, but it's not leaking and it's in place, so I'm going to leave well enough alone. You see, these are our little push rods. I'm just going to have a bit of a look at those to see whether there's any signs of adverse wear or whatever. Everything so well, those not looking too bad. I'm always happy to replace things that need replacing, but if something doesn't need replacing, then I'm not inclined to do it unnecessarily. And I've seen people replace valve stem seals before and they get a socket or a piece of wood or whatever and bash down on the top of the retainers here, but not so keen to do that, because just in case the collet decides to go, the retaining collets decide to go flying out like that kind of thing, and you can't find them. These are just the little caps that sit on top of the end of the valve itself. So the rockers run on this cap, not directly on top of the valve, which means that these are a disposable part and reduces the potential wear and tear on the top of the valve, which sounds like a pretty clever idea. Now, I've also bought new ones of these just in case, but they actually look pretty good. Not seeing any signs of major problems there. So I think I will just put those back on rather than replace them, and I'll keep the other ones I've got. But I'm going to put these caps in order so they go back on the same valves. And I've just realised I didn't bring the new valve stem seals out with me, so that's a bit of a problem. I better go and get them. But before I do that, let's see if we can pull off one of these valves, the valve springs. So to avoid hitting it with a socket, I bought this little piece of kit here, and I'm going to give this a try. I don't know, I've not tried this before, but as I said, I was keen to try and not bash down on these springs if I can, just in case one of those collets disappear, because I believe that they are no longer available to buy. So I picked up this valve spring compressor. And of course the collet doesn't want to let go. Come on, you can do it. Okay, there comes said spring. I'm just going to let that loose so I can do the next one. And I forgot to mention that I got these valves to the piston on number 2 cylinder here to top dead center. So that the valves don't drop down into the combustion chamber. If the piston was down at the bottom, then the valve could fall down into there and make it extremely difficult for me to retrieve. So by having the piston at top dead center, then I have a much better chance. As you can see there, the valve is up here. I should be able to grab hold of that and put the collet back in again. Now that valve stem seal feels a bit loose, as in it's spinning quite easily on that valve stem. Just cleaning the old oil out. Make things a little bit easier for me to see more than anything. And also, hopefully, allow me to cleanly install the new valve stem seal. So it's a little bit of, that's all right there now. Right, I wanted to spin, but now it doesn't want to come off. and I have to go and get my pliers. Because of that, sorry guys. All part of the fun of doing this sort of thing. I'll be back. Okay, one valve stem seal off. That's not going to work. It's grabbed too high. And there's not a lot of room to work in there. Alright, after having to deal with a couple of strange little, well, unforeseen little challenges, I didn't want to take this plate off here because this particular version of the 1501DT is got a little computer on here, because it has some other bells and whistles on it that is not so common here in Australia. So it took a little bit of wrangling to get around there, and that valve compressor that I had was a bit of a struggle to get in there. So rather than go through all that palaver, I've done all of the with the three of the valves here. So I just need to put the valve stem seal and the valve spring and retainers back on top of there. I put the caps, the valve caps, back on the top of those ones. So here we are with a new valve stem seal. Fortunately, while this machine is an old tractor, you can still buy a lot of the kind of critical parts like this. Just putting a little bit of fresh oil on there just to lubricate that as it goes on. This particular valve is the one that was problematic, as in it's the one that was leaking, and it was certainly the loosest valve stem seal. Now, see if we can just coerce it to get on there gently. I don't want to damage the lip of the seal. There we go, it's got it now. Okay, that feels like it's down, and it's certainly much tighter than it was before. You can tell that the valves are at top dead center because they don't go down very far. So I was just taking off the crank or the ring gear cover here, and just used a screwdriver just to turn the engine around so that the valves were at top, or the piston is at top dead center, so the valves don't go very far. I'm not using the valve spring compressor to put the collets back in, because that proved to be just very cumbersome to try and get in between there. So, and because I dropped one of the little collets before, that's why I've now got this little piece of paper towel over those openings where the push rods are, because if one of these little collets went down there, there would be much weeping here above. So just putting the collets in the top like that, and doing this a bit old school. I'm just going to push the valve spring down and get the collets in. Okay, so if I push down on there, you can see the valve is hitting the top of the piston. Oops. That's how you know it's at top dead center, which you need to do before you take those in, because if it's at bottom, then the valve will shoot down and then problems. You could be lucky if it doesn't kind of fall. You could be lucky to wind the engine over and get it back up through again, but best to avoid that kind of an issue, because you don't need it. You don't need that as an issue. Alright, just going to put a little bit more of fresh oil again on this, on these valve caps, just to give it a bit of fresh lubrication. So there we are, 4 new valve stem seals on the tractor. Line the push rods up underneath the rocker arms. And then we can bolt it back down again. There was a flat washer and then a spring washer underneath the nut. Flat washer, spring washer. And then the nut. Trying to put it back together as close to how it came off as is possible. So particularly with the older the engine, the more important it is for wear and tear purposes, so everything remains the same. I'll try and keep everything as close to how it came apart as is possible to minimise potential damage to things. Alright. So I've got my deep socket to allow me to get over that long bolt, and I'm going down carefully A little bit of tension at a time. Try and make sure everything pulls down evenly. Okay, check the push rods are underneath, and if I get my screwdriver here and turn the engine over, you can see maybe this inlet valve is now going down. Everything's looking all right. Okay, I'm going to do a few more checks and then I'll get the valve cover back on again and we'll come back to it after that. Alright, I've got the cover back on, got it fed back through the cover gasket, the rocker cover gasket that was on the head, which I wasn't so keen to replace because it seems in serviceable condition. And now that I've got this back on, I bought some new rubbers that go into these head rocker cover bolts here. I noticed that the old ones have been compressed and there was a bit of oil up and around. It wasn't leaking, but these new ones are much thicker than the old ones. You probably can't see that there, but there's probably a good at least a millimetre difference in the thickness there, so I've got them anyway, so on they go. And I'll just tension these down. So obviously they're not going to be loose, but I don't want to push the rocker cover through the gasket and break it unnecessarily. Sort of cut it. So that feels fine. And obviously I'll double check all of these things here. I've also bought a new O-ring for the bottom of the filler cap, because again I noticed that that was compressed, as you would expect given the age of the machine. So we'll just pull that one off. There. A little bit of a clean. And a nice new seal. Again, it wasn't leaking, but this is all preventative maintenance sort of work, so that's all fine. Beautiful. All I need to do now is put back together the decompression lever. That's got to go on there. Oops. Come back through there. This is a third party little setup that's on here. Get that back into the hole there. So this is just a generic choke cable essentially is what it looks like. It's not the original part, and it actually has a choke symbol on the knob up on the dash there, so someone has just replaced that. It's functional, so that's good, but they've lost a little screw clamp that would hold it into the back of the lever here, so they just had it bent around, so I'm just going to have to do that for the time being until I can find something to sort that out. It's always nice to be able to, if you need to, pull something apart without having to unbend wire. See, that's all a little bit on the ordinary side, but it is what it is for the time being. Have to lubricate that up a little bit. I've actually bolted this little section back in. That was out, I think, because there's too much of a bend in this particular thing. It's not so good, but I'll lubricate that up. We'll make sure that that's functioning properly, because that's kind of important. And we can put our breather pipe back on there as well. And I'll sort out this cable here, make sure that's all functioning correctly, and then I'll move the camera around ready for the oil change, oil filter change. So obviously I dropped the oil the other week, and now we've got the valve stem seals done. I'll get the new oil filter on, and I tend to write the date and the hours on the oil filter so that I can remember what's going on. And I'm keen to get oil back into the engine here, not because I'm about to start it. I need to still put the exhaust system back on, but I went to weld up the holes that are in the muffler, and discovered that my regulator on my argon bottle, oxygen argon bottle, for my MIG welder is broken. Happy days. So I need to source one of that, and it's a long weekend here in Brisbane, holiday on Monday, so it'll be sometime next week before I can go and get that sorted out. But in the meantime, if time permits, I'll get the exhaust manifold and the elbow either sandblasted, wire brushed or whatever, and painted, and maybe sort of get them back on ready for the muffler when I can just weld that up. I've used a flap disc on my grinder this morning to tidy up some of the welds because they were pretty ordinary, and but unfortunately I couldn't weld. So we'll move on to the next bit.